Welcome back to the Adam Schefter podcast. We are through the 2025 NFL Draft in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and because it was so big and because there were so many storylines, we figured that today we would put off the weekly six-pack to a separate podcast that will release on Tuesday, and on Monday, we will turn to our draft experts, the legendary Mel Kiper Jr. and the young, aspiring Field Yates, to break down this year's wins and losses, the saga of Shedeur Sanders, and who will be the top quarterbacks and players in the 2026 NFL Draft. Without further ado, Mel Kiper Jr. and Field Yates. We'll start with Field, your biggest takeaways of the 2025 NFL Draft, Field.
So, Shefty, we came into this draft knowing that there was not a lot of star power at the top, but there was a lot of depth throughout this draft. And in the beginning portions of the draft, we all wondered, could that mean that there was going to be no significant draft trades? Jason Light, the excellent Bucs GM, talked about how, it seems like he said this publicly prior to the draft, a lot more teams motivated to move down than there are teams to move up. Mm-hmm. And I think the storyline of the draft, though, truthfully, was the decision that the Browns and Jaguars made to orchestrate a trade for number 2 overall. We've seen these sort of dare trades in the past, these deals where it's hard to decipher at the very moment that it goes down who the clear winner or loser is. I remember back in the day, Mel's Ravens traded Orlando Brown Jr. to the Chiefs. They're, at the time, arch rival in the AFC, still rivals in the AFC, and Brown, a very talented left tackle. And it was like, man, is this an indication from the Ravens that Brown isn't as good of a player as the public thinks? Or is this an indication that, maybe the Chiefs are going to make this into a steal from Baltimore? Anyways, it ended up working out fine for both sides. But on Thursday night, really Thursday morning, Shefty, I don't want to peel the curtain too far back. But, like most things that take place in the NFL, Adam Schefter knows about them before they actually get out into the ether. I'll leave it there, let Schefter add whatever context he is able to and wants to provide. But Travis Hunter is the face of this draft. The highest graded player on both mine and Mel's boards. Really feel like there's a darn good chance that we're talking about him as the face of this draft for not just the next season, but the next 15, 20 years. That's how special of an individual he is. And yet, by the time that I had processed the trade on Thursday night, I wasn't sitting there saying to myself, what on earth are the Cleveland Browns doing? The Jacksonville Jaguars paid a steep price for a player who, even though I think he will become the face of this draft, and even though I thought he was the best prospect in this draft, and it wasn't close for me, and it was a little gap, there was a gap between him and Abdul Carter, he's a non-quarterback. And how many non-quarterbacks have been proven worth the price that the Jaguars paid, which I'm generally a fan of betting on the downside of teams, especially teams that entered this year's draft class with the 5th overall pick. Jacksonville's going to have to make huge leaps this upcoming year for that pick to not be very, very valuable to Cleveland in 2026, Mel.
Yeah, and the thing that surprised me, Adam, and Field, was obviously Shedeur, but the fact that the quarterbacks, the way they went off the board, with the Shedeur 5, we're going to call it now, and then the Raiders taking a quarterback, Cam Miller, in the 6th round out of North Dakota State, right? And last time I checked, the Steelers took Will Howard in the 6th round out of Ohio State. Yeah, to me, you're taking quarterbacks in the 6th round when you could add Shedeur in the 4th. Or may trade into the 5th and got him before Cleveland did, after they had Telray taken Dylan Gabriel. So obviously the Raiders and the Steelers didn't want Shedeur Sanders because they could have had him, and they ended up taking a quarterback in the 6th round. So they're going to take a quarterback. Yeah. Were these guys ahead of Shedeur? My question: were they ahead of Shedeur on your board? Were they close where you didn't feel like you had to make a move? If Shedeur was significantly ahead, why didn't you go ahead and do it? So that's a story for another day. But the Minnesota Vikings, I thought, when you said didn't have many picks, right? Field, they didn't have many. The Washington Commanders didn't have many picks either. But for what they had, it's quality over quantity. To get, like, say, Josh Connerly Jr. on the O-line when you have a guy that's going to be your franchise, obviously, moving forward, and Jaden Daniels. Yep. He's the Patrick Mahomes of the NFL, you would think he could be. Yep. So the deal is, let's make Jaden the star of his team moving forward. The best way to do that, we saw Mahomes, a superstar in 2 Super Bowls, reduce the mediocrity because the O-line couldn't get it done, right? So let's fortify the offensive line for Jaden. Then to get Trey Amos, a long athletic corner in the second round, and then they get under the radar Jalen Lane. People say, well, a wide receiver. No, a punt returner, a great punt returner. The best punt returner in this draft is Trey Amos. Kane Medrano can fly, and tackling on special teams is going to help him there. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt's going to be a running back. Only played 1 game and then the All-Star game, right? Got a lot of tread on the tires left because he didn't even play. He wasn't able to play because the NCAA said you only played in 1 game, that's it. He had a big game first week against New Mexico, his old team. Yeah. He played till the All-Star game and had another great game. I think he was MVP, wasn't he, Field, of the game?
He was. He was a late.
To get those 5 players, I gave him a pretty high grade. And I was talking about him at the end of the draft. Washington did a lot of good things with very few picks. So I give Washington credit. They're ready to roll. And they added into, what they did for you with Debo and others coming in. So, they did a really nice job, I think, fortifying that team on both sides of the ball with only 5 picks and special teams.
And I think people have to remember that Debo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil are part of this Commanders draft class, which gets overlooked. So in addition to all those players that you cited, Mel, you have to add Debo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil. But you mentioned Shedeur, and I don't want to break down the pick.
Well, we should have the conversation now, though, right?
What's that?
We should have just the whole, we can do it, peacefully. But we should talk about sort of what transpired, and as we've digested it in the 48-ish hours, or not quite 48-ish hours since he was actually selected, what we've come to learn, what we maybe realized, even if it wasn't stated very clearly to us, about this player and this draft, and how it got to the point where he was available at the 144th overall pick for the Cleveland Browns, who just, my math is correct, 50 picks earlier, took Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round out of Oregon. So you thought they were done quarterback shopping because they had seemingly addressed their young quarterback and added that 3rd quarterback to their room behind, in some order, Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett. My takeaway was, and I'll let Mel, I know he's been a very prominent voice on this topic, Shefty. My takeaway from it was this. We've talked consistently. I've said there's 2 categories of quarterback evaluation for every prospect, but it was particularly notable with Shedeur. There was the on-field, the tape stuff, and then there was the intangibles. And the intangibles bucket can be small, it can be rather large. And in the case of Shedeur, it's larger than any other quarterback prospect because it's not just Shedeur, it's his father, Deion Sanders, and the circle that he has around him, which is more notable than maybe any draft prospect we have ever seen. Right, it's got to be at least on the short list for most notable. I think from the tape evaluation, I overestimated, in talking to people after the fact, how much the league viewed Shedeur as a player on the field. Because the truth is, regardless of whatever was taking place in his intangibles bucket, in the circle around Shedeur, if the NFL felt like this was a player who had a really good chance to become even an above-average starting quarterback, he would have gone in the 2nd round at the latest. That's just a fact. It's a stone-cold fact. We see teams make concessions for quarterbacks all the time. The second part of it is the intangibles, and the NFL spoke on that part of it. The NFL spoke about how, because of the specter that comes with Shedeur Sanders, right? And if you're a team that drafts Shedeur Sanders and he's playing for you, and you start off 1-5, and you've got a coach who's not on firm ground, you don't have a coach who's a long time, Andy Reid or John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin, you name it, the fans are going to be calling. And Deion Sanders might say something. He might be at the Colorado practice or at his press conference, and someone might say, hey, would you ever want to coach Shedeur Sanders, your son, again? It's the only coach that Shedeur has ever had. I think teams told us that the intangibles bucket was a bigger factor for Shedeur than it was other prospects. And that, to me, and by the way, they told us that loudly, is how he was available at the 144th pick in this year's draft class. I thought about a lot of scenarios going into the draft. Never in my mind did the idea of Shedeur Sanders falling that low come anywhere close to my conscience.
Yeah, I'll just say this. I think it was, if you want to say personality interviews, and Adam, you can speak to what the NFL was saying. I talked to some guys. You talk to 32 teams. I talked to just my handful. So I don't know. In the field, you talk to teams too. I knew going in, and we had talked about it. I said on all the shows we're at, they said if he was Shedeur Jones, it'd be a 3rd round pick, right? It was about the Shedeur Sanders and all the show and all the talk. But he doesn't have the great arm. He doesn't have he doesn't have explosive arm, explosive legs. He doesn't have this. He would be a third-round pick. Well, he ended up being a fifth-round pick, not a third-round pick. So even if you want to say third, that was for the people who didn't even like him. They were saying third round. Well, he went in the fifth round. Okay. And then, there were some people that liked him. They said, we like him. We don't love him. So you think maybe second round, maybe late first. And I had teams say, Mel, you really want to keep him behind Campbell? I said, yeah. Hell yeah, I am. Yeah. I'm keeping Shedeur Sanders number one. I don't care where he goes. If he goes for late first, if he happens to drop into the early seconds, I always that's why I kept talking. I did that thing for ESPN at List. I went back and said, with this knowledge that the NFL is not super high on Shedeur, let me do a list on sliding quarterbacks. That was the impetus for that, right? Was Shedeur 3 months ago. And I sent that list up to Brian Ryder, and I said, I went back to 1970, whatever it was, late 70s, said, okay, for my ratings, 1979, for my ratings, who were the quarterbacks that slid the most based on grade and mocks and all of it put together? And I came up with the 8. 6 of the 8 hit, 2 didn't. So that's 6-2, right? If you want to say Will Levis, go 6-3. I still, it's still to be determined. He's only been in the league 2 years. But say 6-3 on Levis because he dropped to the second round. I had a high grade on him. Say 6-3. Where's Shedeur going to go? I didn't know he would go in the fifth round, but then the interviews. And I said, well, he felt at the end. I heard all this. Adam, I think you were entitled, right? Entitled and all the different things people were saying. And I said, and Kim and I were talking about it last night. So, did he have handling the process and being prepared for interviews and how do you react to things? A lot of people in any field of work, any line of work will prep for interviews, right? They have people that get you ready to go in. And it's preparation. If they say this, you say, what would you say? Oh, no, don't say that. Say that. So it's not, to me, it's not authentic. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I think what Shedeur is, that's authentic. Sure. He's been around. He's Deion's son. And I don't know if the NFL could deal with the uniqueness of this situation. We've never seen it before where Deion is Deion. And I thought there was a misconception about Deion or misperception about Deion. And I brought it up. And Adam, a great teammate, great leader, great practice guy, baseball, football. It wasn't about the show. It's about the show away from football. But in football mode, it's all football. And Shedeur's the same way. He'll have fun. He'll get along. He'll do all. And then you say, well, he should have taken the interview process more seriously. It's his fault. Yeah. And I said that about other players, by the way, who turned out to be great. I won't mention who they were. They turned out to be really good, who didn't necessarily take it, who kind of hurt themselves by taking the process, not, I would say seriously, but just being who they are. Now, for Shedeur, well, when you say, like, I don't know if it was true, the Giants, they don't take me third on. I don't know what was. I just think what Shedeur wanted was somebody to say, hey, you're my guy. I believe in you. We're going to take you. And he never got that. He didn't get that. And I think he was going to these interviews saying, why am I talking? Which I would say, okay, I'm not wasting are you going to take me? Are you're going to, I'll be all in. You're going to take me. I don't know what was going. It seemed like that was the mode of operation, was that type of thing. I know people are going to say, well, then you get what you deserved. I don't buy that. I think if you're an NFL team and you look at the personality of a young man who's authentic and is a great leader and he galvanizes that team and all the players love him, coaches love him. Yep. What's the problem here? Because somebody rubs you the wrong way when you're talking to him because he's a little entitled and he wants to be, but he was not going to be all in until he's our guy. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. So I don't know. I don't have a problem with that.
But the NFL
go right ahead. Tell me I'm wrong, but I don't have a problem with the way Shedeur handled it. Yeah, could he have been a phony? Could he have been prepped and done it better and fooled and said, I'm going to be this way, but I'm really not? And I said yesterday, what has he done wrong off the field? What has he done wrong?
That's not like that. That's too limited of a view to view it through, right? Like,
well, then tell me what I'm missing, Field.
Well, the NFL told us what we're missing, Mel. The NFL told us that they are not comfortable with the personality, the intangibles, the surroundings for him to go higher than 144th overall, right? I remember each day that passed by. I mean, once we got past night one, I would check in with Adam and I would just say, hey, do you have any sort of sense about where this could unfold or when this could unfold? And one of the themes that Adam, I think, I sort of sensed was that, like, with each day that passed by, you'd think the number of suitors grows because of the fact that when you're not taking a guy third overall and you're taking him 53rd overall, the opportunity cost is much lower. By the time we got to day 3, round 4, and the first pick is 103, I'm sitting there and I'm saying to myself, like, did the Chiefs need a quarterback? No, but, I'm using them as an example. Okay, so they have Patrick Mahomes, they have Gardner Minshew. Could they talk themselves into developing this player? And he still had to wait 41 more selections. And the team that wound up taking him had already taken a quarterback, as I mentioned, 50 picks before. The reality is, Shedeur and how the pre-draft process unfolded hopefully is a lesson for him, and it's something for him to build off of, and maybe perhaps a lesson for future prospects as well. This has been talked about a decent amount over the past couple of days, and I'm not saying that NFL agents can cure every single thing that a prospect has to deal with, but they are a liaison to the league and can really help players through the process and land somewhere. As a matter of fact, his younger brother, Shiloh, who did not have an agent, signed with an agent. I think it was either at the very end of like round 7 or it was like minutes
Saturday.
after the end. Yeah, during the draft, he signs with an agent and ends up getting a deal with the Buccaneers just a few moments later. So I think there are a lot of lessons here for Shedeur, and I think that the NFL told us 2 things. One, they were not nearly as optimistic and bullish on this prospect as those of us in draft analyst roles were, and also they were not nearly as comfortable with the player as maybe some of us in draft analyst roles were. As Mel has said, there have been notable misses by the league at large. Maybe this will be another one of them. But the NFL is telling us that they think it's more likely than not that this player probably lands at best as more like as a backup as opposed to a longtime franchise quarterback.
Mel, you mentioned that there were 8 other quarterbacks. Do you remember the list of quarterbacks? 6 of them went on to basically make it, if you will.
It was Aaron Rodgers, Boomer Esiason, Brett Favre, Dan Marino, Chad Pennington dropped to 18 from item like 5-6. It was one other, Geno Smith.
Lamar Jackson, 32.
Now, Lamar wasn't. Lamar had grades close enough, but it was, I know, Geno.
Yeah.
And then the 2 that didn't were Brady Quinn and Jimmy Clausen.
Yep.
The only 2 that I could remember, and we cited it on the draft on Sunday, we had Ryan Nassib from Syracuse fell one year.
Matt Barkley.
They weren't high enough for me. I will say, and Adam, and Field, this taking 2 quarterbacks deal. RG3 went number 2 overall when they took Kirk Cousins in the 4th round. Yeah. Schuler went in the top 5, I believe, and they took Gus Frerotte in the 7th round that same year. So I remember in Dallas, they had Troy Aikman and Jimmy Johnson came from Miami and drafted Steve Walsh in a supplemental draft.
Yeah.
And then traded him to New Orleans. They got like a 1st, 2nd, 3rd round pick for Steve Walsh, but had Troy Aikman and drafted Steve Walsh in a supplemental draft and lost the future number 1. So, we already had Aikman. It was obviously not a great start to careers. Everybody doesn't start out like a house of fire. Sometimes they have to progress and develop, and a team's got to get better. And then they ended up trading him there. But it ended up where Frerotte was better than Schuler, and Cousins was better than RG3. So from a career standpoint, so these 2 teams, so that's the notion of Gabriel and Shedeur, or you could have drafted a guy in the 1st, and it's still, we'll see. For the Shedeur thing, there's a million analysts out there. A lot of them played football. A lot of them were scouts. I talked to a lot of them that were out of the league now. They thought at worst Shedeur would be a 2nd round pick at worst. So this notion that it was, they're telling you it would have been a backup only field. I don't agree with it. I think I think what happened here was they weren't as high, and I think through the process it affected how he was viewed. Yeah. And then it got to the point where they said, okay, is it worth it for a quarterback that we don't love? We like him, but is it worth it?
Right.
And you talked about Pittsburgh, Adam. They like him. Did they love him? They took Will Howard in the 6th round.
Yeah, right.
They took Will Howard in the 6th round, so they took a quarterback. Las Vegas with Tom Brady. I don't know how much influence Tom has, but you would think with Geno being 35 years old, the Raiders in a dome stadium, perfect for Shedeur. They took in a 6th round Cam Miller out of North Dakota State. So that it's basically tells you they didn't want to deal with the show.
Yeah.
The perceived show.
But here's the thing, though.
I don't know if it's the front office, but the show, what's Deion going to do? I heard this said, well, when he's at Colorado, he's going to be commenting about the game. They should have done. It's not going to happen. That was fake news.
But it's not fake news. It's not anymore because he went 144th overall. So it's not perception. It's reality in the eyes of the NFL.
Well,
right?
But who cares?
The NFL does.
Let me say this. That's why I say who cares, because guess what? And I said this during the draft. What do they say about Tom Brady now? Adam, you here? We had a 2nd round grade on Tom Brady. Of
course. Yeah, everybody, yeah.
We had a 2nd round grade on Tom Brady.
Everybody wanted to trade it for Patrick Mahomes.
So really? Yeah, 2nd round grade on Tom Brady is the end of the 6th round. Would you not have taken him? Yeah, but they didn't. So my point is, Shedeur Sanders, this is all about, this was a personal thing about Shedeur and Deion. It had nothing to do with Shedeur as a player. Nothing to do with Shedeur as a player.
I think
so this notion they're thinking it's just that's baloney. They didn't want to deal with the show. Yep. That's why he's a 5th round pick. And all these other quarterbacks, the Shedeur 5 went ahead of him. And a couple quarterbacks went right after him to teams that didn't take Shedeur. And there's no way you're going to tell me Shedeur's not better than those quarterbacks. You can say some of them, not all of them. There's no way you're going to tell me all those quarterbacks are better than Shedeur Sanders. No way.
I can't imagine I'll ever have the 16th ranked player on my final big board available going into day 3, unless that player, after I submit the big board, tears his ACL, 3 hours before the draft. Like, it's just never going to happen again. I just can't imagine it will. But
Shedeur can make us all look good. See, it ended the first day where I was the one being hammered, right? Evidently, I was trending on Twitter, right? All the IOTs out there were hammering me, right? So when the IOTs stopped, okay, and I was in the second, maybe the third, fourth, fifth round. When Dion was, when Shedeur was finally, and we had the reaction in the swimming pool. So everybody said, where's you? I had him 9th. I had him 15th. I had him 25th. Well, you look like an idiot too, right? If you want to say that, if we're going by mocks. So the whole thing about Kiper had him 5. This one, if you had him in the first round, and you had him in the first round grade, and he goes in the 5th round, it's a little off. Okay, something's not right here, guys. Something's not right here. It doesn't compute. Yeah. So all I say is, the IOTs are doing their thing. They're saying what they have. They have a right to say whatever they want. Now we get back to reality, and we say Shedeur goes into Cleveland with a lot of quarterbacks in that quarterback room, and we'll see how it plays out. Okay? That's all I'll say. And we go back to Brady, and I always tie Brady into this because we go real time. Not what Brady is now, the greatest of all time. What he was perceived as then. And I looked at my report, and I looked at my notes from when Brady, and these were people in the NFL, guys. Okay? Tom Brady, non-athlete, slow as molasses in January, couldn't beat a turtle in a race, right, and very mediocre arm. That's Tom Brady. That was the report on Tom Brady coming out.
That's why we went 199.
In the 6th round, Hofstra quarterback went in the 3rd, and all that stuff, right? And the 49ers drafted that Hofstra quarterback. Where was Tom Brady? Where did he grow up? Who was he a fan of? 49ers. He went to the Montana Dwight Clark game, loved the 49ers, thought he'd be a 2nd, 3rd round pick, maybe 3rd. In the 3rd round, they take a Hofstra. So how does Tom Brady feel on draft day when even his own team, New England, to draft them, took Antoine Harris, a corner from Virginia, in the 6th round before they took Tom Brady at the end of the 6th? Okay? So again, the whole Tom Brady thing, now we hear now, we had a 2nd round grade on Tom Brady. That's what I'm saying. What are we going to hear about? I don't know how Shedeur's career is going to play out. I sat with Boomer Esiason. I talked to Boomer right after the draft. He was disappointed. Yep. Three Bengal players went in the 1st round. Boomer went in the 2nd. 2nd's a far cry from the 5th, but Boomer wasn't happy. He dropped to the 2nd. I told you, I left that draft thinking I'm never going to be back at ESPN. My career's over. I had him 3rd on my board. He went in the middle of the 2nd round or whatever, 2nd round. Boomer saved me. I would say Boomer Esiason saved me. I don't know what Shedeur's going to do. I'm at the end of it now. I'm the old guy, right? I don't really, it doesn't matter to me, whatever. Shedeur's going to affect you, Field, because you got him pretty high now, okay? You had Shedeur pretty high now.
I'm not
trying to make you look good, and Matt and Jordan and all the guys and Daniel, everybody's going to have to worry about Shedeur now. I don't, but you guys have to worry about Shedeur. Like I had to worry about Boomer. I worried about Boomer. He was my guy, Maryland Terrapin. Nobody liked Boomer. Right? Nobody loved Boomer because nobody took him. And the Bengals didn't even love Boomer. They took 3 guys ahead of him. They settled for him in the 2nd round. Boomer Esiason saved me. Let's see if Shedeur can save everybody else.
Mel, did it bother you, the noise that people make, the criticism? Like you care about it?
I didn't even know about it. I didn't even know about it, Adam. I was told Seth Markman comes in and says, Mel, you're trending on Twitter. I don't know what they said. I got to believe it wasn't nice. Okay? But I didn't read one of them. But I was told I was trending over Shedeur Sanders. I said even address maybe he'll go into the UFL or the CFL. Maybe it'll be Kurt Warner. Maybe he'll go play in the CFL or go in the UFL. Maybe Shedeur should do that to prove to these guys in the NFL he can play. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen there. But they said I was trending on Twitter over Shedeur. I don't know if I was trending when he was in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. Maybe Fielding should have been trending on Twitter then.
Hey Mel, you know what? You know what I always say? You're a trendsetter.
He is.
Hey, the IOTs can do what they want to do. Okay.
Yeah. I'm glad we got that out.
Yeah. Give me each of you. I'd like you to each give me a team whose draft you weren't thrilled with. Field.
Ooh, a team that I wasn't thrilled with. I thought we were gonna go positive here, so I have my team ready. Mel, do you have an obvious answer that you didn't love? So I can take a.
I didn't love Atlanta.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
I didn't love giving up as much as they did to get James Pierce Jr.
Yep.
I thought that was one that, Grady went in the first round. I hope he has 12, 15 sacks a year.
Yep.
I thought that was a lot to give up. You already had Jalen Walker. I get it. That's what they want to do. They want to come off the edge. They want to get after the quarterback. That's the need. To give up that. They didn't get a corner as well. The other team was the Bengals. And we could sit here and talk all we want. This is a guy can either make your draft or break your heart, is Shamar Stewart. He can be a great pick. He can be a guy can be dominant off the edge if he can maximize all that talent. But I'm a little skeptical of a guy who didn't have the sack production in college. Fairchild in the third, okay. Barrett Carter, Jalen Rivers, Taj Brooks, okay. I looked at my grades, and as you did, Field, it wasn't a wow me over type of draft for the Bengals. They did draft. And by the way, I want to bet from you, Field. You owe me, pal.
What do I owe you on?
You owe me.
Which one?
You don't remember. That's why people lose a bet. They don't remember.
Was it the bet again? Was it about Shamar Stewart? Was it about quarterbacks?
Bengals taking an offensive player in the first round.
Dang it. Well, they would.
Now he remembers. Yeah, he thought the Bengals could take an offensive guard in the first round. I said, "There's no way they're taking a defensive player in the first round. There's no way." So they took Shamar Stewart. So Fielding, you owe me, pal.
All right, I don't know what it is, but I'll find something to owe you.
It's just the fact I won the bets enough.
Jersey Mike sub. A Jersey Mike sub.
Yeah, whatever. But yeah, they did, and they drafted. Hey, by the way, give you credit, Fielding. They got the guard in the third round.
Very good. Did they get two, right? They had Dylan Fairchild and somebody else.
Dylan Fairchild and Jalen Rivers. Jalen Rivers in the fifth.
Back-to-back. Yep, that's right. So back-to-back guards for them. I think, Shefty, one of the things that I realized when you're doing, when you're working in this role and you're grading, I think in my case it was like 421 guys that I studied at some point, and then 82 went back to school. So whatever that pool ends up being, around 340 or so prospects that you're looking at. You don't find drafts that you say to yourself, I don't like what they did from start to finish. It's just portions of the day that you agree with, or portions of the weekend that you agree with more than others. Amongst the players that were the most significant reaches on my big board in round one, relative to where they ended up going, Tyleik Williams for the Lions in round one, I thought you could have gotten him at the second. They had the 57th pick. I wouldn't have been stunned if he were available there, but the Lions have earned the benefit of the doubt, given how they've been unorthodox with some of their picks in recent drafts and been outstanding in the draft. Miami was a team that, because of the fact that they took a player in Kenneth Grant 13th that I had, I think, 31st on the big board, and 18 spots is a relatively large gap that early on in the proceedings, and then only had 2 picks until the 5th round. I think the potential impact here is lower relative to some of the other draft classes that I have seen. I give Miami credit for this. Miami has, for the past few years, been a team that when it's a track meet can compete. But when it is a rugby scrum, they can't, right? They just weren't tough enough consistently late in the season or against quality teams. If you look at their record with Tua and Mike McDaniel as the head coach and quarterback combination, when they play good competition, they wilt. When they play, the patty cake teams, they end up taking care of business more often than not. So they got decidedly tougher. That was from the start with Kenneth Grant, who's 331 pounds and has been, amongst the best run stuffers in college football during his 3-year career. And that continued all the way to the 6th round. In the 7th round, they got Ollie Gordon, the running back from Oklahoma State, in the 6th round, who's 230-pounder who ran a 4.6 140, so it's more about power than it is speed. And Zeke Biggers, a defensive tackle from Georgia Tech, with their final pick, amongst the final picks in the entire draft class, who's just going to really defend the run. But I would just say, the potential for overall impact is lower here for Miami relative to some of the teams that I thought acquitted themselves better.
And before I let you go, I want you to give me a look ahead. I know we just got through the Shedeur mess, but who are the top quarterbacks in the 2026 draft class, Mel?
I think Drew Aller has a chance at Penn State. Yep. We're not going to get to Arch. I think Arch will go back. I don't know if the Mannings will allow Arch after 1 year as a starter to come out. Peyton and Eli went back. So Arch, we'll leave Arch. We don't know what Arch is going to be. He played in 3 games against some bad teams, right? So what Arch Manning becomes, Sam Levitt, let's leave him out of the equation at Arizona State. He's only 20 years old, had the one big year at Arizona State. So Sam Levitt, Arch Manning. Lenora Sellers at South Carolina is a talented kid.
Very talented.
Garrett Nussmeier, Cade Klubnik at Clemson, Carson Beck as well. Then Nico's at UCLA, right? Left Tennessee to go to UCLA. We'll see what Nico can develop into out there. Carson Beck, what he can do after leaving Georgia for Miami. But right now, I think this is the Drew Aller year. Drew Aller contemplated maybe leaving, Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton came back to 2 running backs, just like happened with Travion Henderson. They added Quinshon Judkins at Ohio State, and then Will Howard came in, and all this was going on at Ohio State. I think when you look at having guys like that back, should help him and should allow Drew Aller with another year to really step it up to maybe become a number 1 pick overall or somewhere in that mix to be the first quarterback. We'll see what happens with Archfield. And I do think when you look at T.J. Parker at Clemson, the edge rusher, Caden Proctor, the offensive tackle at Alabama, Caleb Downs, the safety at Ohio State, Peter Woods, defensive tackle defensive lineman. They move him around even on the edge from Clemson. Keldrick Falk, an edge guy at Auburn, are all players I think we'll be keeping an eye on going into this season.
Dang, that's a pretty exhaustive list right there from Kiper, right off the top of the brain. I think the quarterback list was all really strong. I'd say that probably the 3, Shefty, that feel like the best bets to play well next year and also declare next year because of where they're at in their college career. Garrett Nussmeier, Drew Aller, Cade Klubnik. Mel was accurate. I mean, the word, and again, this is just the word, from people that have been down there visiting Texas for scouting visits, has been that they expect Arch to be there for 2 seasons. Well, 2 more seasons. Will that prevail? We'll see. But that has been the sentiment that scouts have been gathering when they spent time around that Texas program this past season. The only question I have, and I'm actually not begrudging the decision because he finished his career on a sour note, as I just think back on this draft class, though, I wonder how high Drew Aller would have gone if he had declared from Penn State this year. Because, as we know, I mean, the second quarterback was Jackson Dart at 25. That's still a pretty large gap from 1 to 25. Cam Ward to Jackson Dart at 25. It feels like the floor for Drew probably would have been somewhere in the first round based off the way that the NFL, based off what I had been gathering during the football season, was where he was stacking up. Again, he could come back and be the number 1 overall pick in the draft next year, and it could make this entire decision to stay or go moot. But I just was sort of thinking about that as we were sort of recalling how this draft unfolded. Can I give you a draft that I like just because I feel bad that we had to go negative Nancy throughout portions of the podcast?
Okay.
You know, I've really come to appreciate
wherever the wind takes us, right?
Yeah. I like teams where I can identify the type of player that they covet, and I can identify the players that make sense within what they covet and what they need. The Chargers have something.
Let me ask this.
Okay.
Who Field had the best draft, in your opinion?
I liked what the Chargers did this weekend. I really did. And they had an excellent start last year. I mean, the way that they attacked the early portions of the draft really actually all layers of the draft. To land Joe Alt and Lab McConkey to start the draft, like that's a foundational building draft right there. They showed they understood the later portions of the draft as well with Tariq Steele and some other and other players that are going to factor in. Cam Hart, couple of late round cornerbacks that are already factoring in for them or will continue to. I like what they did this year. There's still some meat and potatoes nature to it. I mean, Omarion Hampton, their first round pick, 22 overall, is a big, powerful, physical runner who's going to fit in ideally with how they want to run the ball. But they also addressed the perimeter of their receiving core. And they said that we need some speed here. Trey Harris in the second round from Ole Miss, not a super duper burner, but I think fast enough. But Keandre Lambert-Smith, the guy that Mel and I talked about on our show leading up to the draft, from Auburn, spent 4 years at Penn State, 4.3, 740 at the combine. Penn State's been around for a long time, and they've had some darn good receivers come out. They've never had a player prior to Keandre Lambert-Smith who had multiple 80-yard catches in his career. So with Justin Herbert and that exceptionally strong arm and the lack of great, consistent, deep speed on that roster last year, it's a day 3 pick, so I'm always being a little bit more measured than I would if the guy was taken, 48th overall. But if you told me that at some point this year, Keandre Lambert-Smith shakes free for a 75-yard touchdown, I won't be surprised.
I always like teams that come out of a draft with added firepower. And the Cleveland Browns and the Los Angeles Rams both did that. Yep. Both have ones next year. We heard Mel detailing some of the quarterback prospects. And by the way, Cleveland could be in the quarterback market again next year. And if they are well positioned. The Los Angeles Rams need a successor to Matthew Stafford. Yep. I would expect they'll be in the quarterback market. There's their ammunition. Both those teams are sitting pretty with first-round picks from teams that haven't made the playoffs in recent years. We don't know how the Jacksonville Jaguars
Yep.
and the Atlanta Falcons are going to be this year. Both teams have high hopes. Both teams think they're going to be improved, but we don't know how they're going to be. And here, the Browns and Rams are sitting on the ones of those teams. For a team that picked players, I thought, as usual, I thought Seattle did a great job.
Yep,
Let the draft kind of come to them, came up with great players early on, like what John Schneider, the Seahawks GM, did there. Thought Seattle had a very, very strong draft.
I think and again, I mentioned at the top of the show, Shefty, that sometimes landing a lot of the players in your top 100 is a byproduct by having A, early premium picks, because you had a bad record last year, and then B, extra draft capital. But I believe, I want to say might have been, it might have been the Bears, because they had a lot of picks early. It might have been the Patriots. They had a lot of picks early. So I have to go through and tabulate it. But those are always going to be drafts that you tend to lean towards as well, just because there is an inherent bias towards your own rankings. There's a reason why we put in the 10 plus or 11 plus months, of work to land on those final rankings.
Well, Mel, I appreciate your time today. Field, I appreciate your time today. Mel, thank you for all you do for ESPN, for the draft industry, for everything. Field, thank you for the coffee every single day. Appreciate
all I'm good for.
Thank you both for your time today. And we'll go from this to the ESPN draft grade special that we're now about to tape, correct?
Exactly.
It's a marathon, baby.
Through first draft podcast, then the draft grades and NFL Live, and then we'll start worrying about the undrafted free agents where they went. I saw we talked about Xavier Restrepo goes to with Cam Ward, right, in Tennessee.
That's right. That one's fun.
We'll see. I'll leave it with this, Adam. After Isaiah Bond was not drafted, right, out of Texas, wide receiver, who was the next highest rated player on your board, undrafted, Field?
Chandler Martin actually, was it Chandler Martin? Him or Kobe Bryant, who I believe ended up with the Steelers. Kobe Bryant, the corner from Kansas, or Chandler Martin, the linebacker from Memphis, where did I see he wound up? Probably with the Ravens, just because they seem to always do fun stuff with the undrafted free agents.
Did Isaiah Bond wind up somewhere?
Not yet. So, and that was, he was the highest graded player that I know both Mel and I had as the backdrop for those that aren't as familiar. Legal issues, some very, very, very significant accusations levied against Isaiah Bond. We'll see where that ends up in the legal process, but he was undrafted, which was no surprise. The minute it happened, I had my rankings and we talked through it on ESPN.com, and feedback was, hey, we'll see what happens, but brace for the possibility of him going undrafted.
Yeah, my highest rated guy, after I'll just leave it with this, was Sebastian Castro, the cornerback safety, slot corner from Iowa. Good football player. Didn't have quite as great a year this past year. Didn't run great at the combine with the 4.6, but he's a good football player. Help you on special teams, and versatility in the secondary will be a plus. Sebastian Castro from Iowa is going to be a nice addition to a football team as an undrafted free agent.
Amen to that.
Gentlemen, I tip my cap to both of you for the work that you did this past year, for the work that you did this weekend, and for the incredible men that you both are. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Adam, I can say, as the Field knows this, Adam, we have 365 days a year with no breaks. Field and I are going to have some orange crushes. Field's going to come down to Kent Island. Field's going to have some fun down here. Adam,
Field's coming down there?
You don't have any breaks, or you can come one down as well. Whenever you do get a break, come one down. So, we're going to have some fun over the next few months and regenerate when Adam never has a chance to regenerate.
That's right.
So we will have that chance, and then we'll be ready to roll August 1st.
And Schefter, you should know this. You are more instrumental in pre-draft coverage than you give yourself credit for, because there's no motivation for anybody to be entirely transparent about where things are, what they're going to do in their draft, right? There's no motivation. There's none, right? It's a competitive disadvantage. Your column on Monday was as illuminating of any column that you'll see as it pertains to the draft. And we've talked about this. I know you and I have talked about this. Mel and all three of us talked about this. Your presence on a lot of the shows that we did from January until April helps us so much, right? Just to get a general sense of, Mel and I are talking to as many people as we possibly can, right? But we don't have every single power player on speed dial. And even if people aren't being totally truthful with you, people can steer you in directions that really helps us in the mock draft process and also helping to set those final boards. So
how many times, Phil, did I say, Yep. Adam said New Orleans isn't taking them.
That's right.
E.F. Hutton, right? Yeah. I listen. I listen, Adam.
That's right.
That's what somebody in the league we were going through, and he said, "Well, do you want to be right?" I said, "Yeah, I'd like to be. I got my own opinion, but yeah, I'd like to be right." With Adams, I'd say 90. What do you would say? What's the percentage for Adam Schefter to be right on stuff like that? I'll say 95%.
I'm having a hard time finding.
I was going to say 99, but I'll say 95% on things that he said over the last X amount of years has turned out to be dead on. So when Adam says something's happening, you'd be I won't even say what I'd be if I didn't
listen. You'd be a fool to not listen. You'd be a fool to not listen. So thank you, Shefty.
First of all, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. You guys are doing the day-to-day, and I'm not involved in the day-to-day micro stuff of the draft. But then I come in, you're so close to the picture that sometimes you don't see the frame. So I come in at the end and I can see little things happening and speak to people and get certain things. And I appreciate you saying that. That's very nice.
Let's call it the voice of reason.
Well, sometimes it goes that way.
Let me just tell you what. Last thing, I got screenshots. If Shefty had done a mock, he might have hit 22 of the 32 picks.
Well, but the information's coming in at the end too. Like
that's fine.
I'll give you an example. It was very funny. At 3 picks into the draft, Shedeur Stewart's agent texts me, "What are you hearing?" And I go, "It's early. It's the 3rd pick." But what did I say, Field? You saw the text, right?
You said I think
I'm hearing Cincinnati.
I'm thinking, Cincinnati.
I'm hearing Cincinnati, and then lo and behold,
14 picks in advance. By the way, like you're hearing it. I'm not saying this was likely, but hey, the Browns could have traded down from 2 to 5 and said, "Hey, we're taking a big swing on Shedeur Stewart," and it would have blown that intel up. And then here we are, 14 picks later, with the 17th pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. Shedeur Stewart, defensive end, Texas A&M. Who, by the way, I was in the green room for Thursday night, and I know that these guys are all incredibly built. I've never seen anybody look like Shedeur Stewart. I get it now, man. I mean, just up close, I was like, there's no way that him and I are the same species because I must not be. He is a human. He is a superhuman. I am just a mere mortal.
I'll say this, Adam, you're in the loop, pal. In the loop. That's what we're saying in Baltimore now. In Baltimore, we're saying, right? In the loop.
Because of the kicker. That's right. Yeah. Tyler Loop.
That's right.
Whoa, in the loop. Hey, hold on. What did I say at the morning meeting that day?
You said the Baltimore Ravens have 4 6-round picks. Let's be prepared for them taking a kicker.
Tyler Loop.
Tyler Loop. Yep.
Well, every now and then. I appreciate both you guys. You guys did tremendous work all year, all weekend, and I'm grateful for the time you gave me. And we will see you on the.
I got 2 words for you, Adam. Special. 2 words I'll leave the podcast with. Go Shedeur.
Go Shedeur.
Go get him, Shedeur.
Go Shedeur. We're all rooting for Shedeur. Oh, man. We're all rooting for Shedeur, right? Especially fielding.
Yep, that's right.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thanks, Shefty.
Appreciate it.